Likewise.
Yes.
It always seems like it's been too long, even when it hasn't.
Always. Right? I think that's the hidden secret sauce of the fantasy football world is that for the most part, we all really like each other and like spending time with each other. And that I think gives off. And we're going to like spending time with you here. Let's go live. 3, 2, 1. Where will Aaron Rodgers play? Will Aaron Rodgers even play football in 2021? That and more this week on the couch. Bob Harris, you've been around. You've seen it all. Have you seen something like this? Where's Aaron Rodgers going to play this year?
Yes, I have seen people unhappy and petulant and irritated. And, without saying it's not without reason, right? There's been poor communication, obviously, with the selection of Jordan Love. But, and once you acquire him with that pick, you've kind of put a timetable in motion, right? You've got to at least find out what you have within a certain window, or you're throwing away whatever money if you take that fifth-year option. So I understand why Aaron Rodgers might be a little peeved about all this. I understand why he feels disrespected. I understand why he'd like to see Brian Gutekunst go by the wayside. All these things. And I think in the end, whatever happens, I expect Aaron Rodgers to be under center in a Green Bay Packers uniform come week 1. I mean, because it's May. And there's a lot of time to work this out. And we hear the ups and downs, Sigmund, right? Like James Jones, I think it's going to be okay. And AJ Huck, I think it's going to be okay. And then Devontae Adams comes, no, it's not okay. And, you kind of live and die in each moment. Don't live and die in the moment. Make your decision, look forward. I've been drafting heavily Aaron Rodgers, feel like I'm getting a great deal on him. Also, I'm making the adjustment. I'm drafting another quarterback that I feel pretty confident in that's great values. And there's a tons of quarterbacks at great values, getting in Matt Ryan a little later, getting Ryan Tannehill way later. All these things I'm comfortable with and living with it, right? Because we're drafting in May, Sig, and we don't know what's going to happen. You'll be surprised to learn not everyone's going to be alive next Sunday, according to Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm fine with this. Well, I hope I'm alive next Sunday, but I hope we all are. But that's the point. I mean, when we're drafting at this point, we have to understand the risks we're taking, and we mitigate them with subsequent picks to the degree we can.
And in so much, Bob, that the sports gambling world is mushrooming and enveloping everything. You can put your money where your mouth is at any point. Just now you can bet on games during the game, right?
Right.
You get live lines and win probabilities, etc. So if you have a strong feeling about this Aaron Rodgers situation, you can put your money where your mouth is, not only with early fantasy drafts or making trades in your dynasty leagues. You can get Super Bowl futures on teams like Denver or the Raiders. Those are the two teams you mentioned, or the Packers by the dip, right? Yep. So let's unpack this just a little bit more, Bob.
Sure.
And I'm going to throw 3 things out there. You may say none of the above, all of the above. But when you say you think week 1, Rodgers takes the snap for the Packers, do you think that's because Rodgers will blink? Do you think that's because the Packers will blink? Or is it just your overall experience with these kinds of situations and expecting that it's more likely that, the inertia will keep it going forward instead of a massive change?
So it's a brave new world. Tom Brady broke the football, right? And the Buccaneers as well. And all these other players are seeing Tom Brady was allowed to go somewhere, be in charge of everything, and the Buccaneers won a damn Super Bowl. Let me do that. And so, but mostly I think we're just caught up in an emotion, right? And as things cool down, look, there's completely different situations we can look at, right? We can look at Deshaun Watson, who I think is like 1090 not to be playing, right? And I'm probably being generous there. And I think there's Aaron Rodgers, who's 90-10, and maybe I'm overstating my case. But either way, there's a lot of time to cool down. There's also $30 million involved. I'm not saying that Aaron Rodgers is like, so into money that he wouldn't take a principled stand. I would also say $30 million is a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, even if you have a lot of money, that's a lot of money. So I just think at some point things tend to cool down, the heat of emotions. I mean, we've all been there, and we all make decisions, based on emotion, and all 99% of the time we regret them. And so mm-hmm. I just think this needs some time to settle down, cool down. I think there'll be a lot of drama in between. And if you're one of those fantasy managers who can, withstand the day-to-day to and fro, that kind of, drama, then I encourage you to dive in and mitigate. Be careful. Have a backup plan. But that's how you do it. And I'm sure the Packers wish they had a better backup plan than Jordan Love at the moment. But I think this just in general, we're going to see. I thought, just a slight tangent. And Bucky Brooks kind of threw out the notion that maybe instead of paying Lamar Jackson, if you're Baltimore, maybe you move on and you let him graduate. And this was his thought was you could draft Justin Fields and essentially let someone graduate. Look, I get that this seems crazy on the surface, but also, do you think the Rams wish that maybe they hadn't paid that big contract to Jared Goff? Yes. Do you think maybe the Ravens wish they had not paid big contracts to Joe Flacco previous? I just wonder if the money isn't getting to be so much that we're going to see teams making entirely different decisions than they've made in the past. And that band of quarterbacks they view as true franchise quarterbacks. Because, you're going to have to invest $500 million in these guys, right? That's a big investment. Maybe you want to build your team a different way and you want to take that same route that, say, the Seahawks pioneered with Russell Wilson, getting the quarterback on that first contract and building around him. And then maybe you think about it, what does he turn into? So I think we're going to see a lot of different ways. I think we'll see teams taking different approaches to quarterbacks going forward, just given the amount of money that's involved. I know they're going to be making a ton of money and the cap will be back up to where it should be and all these things. But, man, that's still, $500 million. I'm fine doing it with Mahomes, and I'm fine doing it when you're confident in a player. But what if you're not all the way confident? What if you're just not sure? So I think we'll see different things. Aaron Rodgers, and seeing part of that is going to see quarterbacks trying to assert themselves more. Because why? They're worth $500 million.
Right. Well, there's all kinds of trends intersecting here. One I've certainly brought up a lot in the last few years. People bring up the NBA, the player empowerment era. Do players have too much power? In some ways, if you want to take the angle that the Packers will win, whatever winning looks like, this standoff, it's because, maybe on behalf of all of the owners, they're going to draw a line in the sand and say, no, we aren't going to let you make our GM decision. It doesn't matter whether you're right. We still can't yield that to a quarterback. In some ways, Houston, although we saw Houston as more of an intractable organization, maybe that not necessarily brought this on themselves, but they're not an average organization in terms of their ability to meet players halfway. Green Bay, the great Eric Stoner brought up something interesting too about the situation, that if the Packers had an owner,
right,
that owner could step in and say, just pay Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
Just
or
pay
just or just fire the GM.
Right.
I think that this is part of the dynamic here is it is the Packers, and they're a unique organization and they don't have a single owner. So I think other teams, and I think we're going to see Carolina, as a team that we've talked about before. David Tepper didn't spend all this money to be an 8-8 owner. He said it.
Right.
He's made it clear, and he thinks the quarterback is the path to his success. I don't think Sam Darnold is not his endpoint here, right? He sees that maybe there's issues. I think Deshaun Watson has been his endpoint for quite a while.
Right.
And maybe he just sees that that's delayed right now and that he's willing to play a little longer game. But I think the dynamic of team owners is a big factor here. And they're going to be guys who realize, look, man, I got to have this franchise player. I got to have a Pat Mahomes. And there are others who are going to say, look at what the Rams, what happened to the Rams. They traded up and overpaid for Jared Goff. They overpaid him on his contract. Then they had to pay to get rid of him. Right. So, there's you could see that there's not one approach. It's not a one size fits all approach. Right. And so I think you're going to be seeing teams, given the amount of investment they're going to have to make in real franchise quarterbacks, take a longer look at what they view as being a real franchise quarterback.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think we saw while we're on this discussion of how the NFL treats quarterbacks, you still see in the draft the desperation, or the sense that, the quarterbacks, maybe Trevor Lawrence had an extremely higher hit rate for a quarterback, but otherwise Wilson and Lance, as much as I love Lance and Fields, for their various reasons, have much lower hit rates than the players that were going around them on the board, right?
Yep.
You're making this implicit trade. Well, we're passing up a player that's more of a sure thing at another position, maybe even an important position, to get a quarterback because you just don't get that many chances. And one thing that I want to point out is we did finally see that downward pressure on the stopgap starters. Remember Mike Glennon got like $15 million a year, right? Like now, even though the cap is growing, those stopgap starters are getting 10 million, 7 million. You know, Teddy Bridgewater took a pay cut down to what, like 3 million.
Yep.
So that has helped teams.
Well, he's still getting 10, just Carolina's paying.
Well, right. True. Good point. But my point is, I guess, just to say that those numbers aren't going to come back. Another thing that I wonder about, Bob, and it's going to be interesting to see how well quarterbacks in that middle tier can play their hand, is do you see a return to the Colin Kaepernick, Andy Dalton style contract? You can remember when they were hitting their second contract, their teams wisely basically gave them a bunch of team options.
Right.
I mean, if you keep playing up to this level, then we'll keep paying you that much, but we can get out at any time we want. And I wonder after how the Goff contract went, if that's not something built in. But then on the other hand, Bob, Sam Darnold still drew a second round pick plus. Yep. Carson Wentz drew a second round pick and then second or third and another second or first. And these guys are coming off of horrendous seasons. Now you can say it's the organization crumbling around them, but either way. Yeah. So, hey, you know, depending on your quarterback, go ahead.
In the case of Wentz, I can kind of see it, right? I mean, there are circumstances that, like, when we last saw him with Frank Reich, it was like an MVP kind of level season. And here he is. Frank Reich needs a quarterback. And so, I mean, all the pieces seem to fall into place. I don't see it as much with Darnold, although I understand he's young and, you know, I mean, it was a horrible circumstance he was in and maybe you believe in the talent. That's why, but he is why I don't think this is the end point for the Panthers. I think this is a stopgap, a better stopgap in their mind than Teddy Bridgewater, and but a stopgap nonetheless. And look, I'm not against players, you know, the quarterbacks asserting, any player asserting themselves and getting whatever they can out of an organization or a situation. I think it's how it should work. Tom Brady has demonstrated this, and I think other players should do the same, right? They should have some influence. I think Russell Wilson should have more say. But the problem for him also is it's kind of an ownerless situation in Seattle where there's kind of a trust or a company that leads it, and Pete Carroll's the boss of all that.
Yeah,
and, you know, and so as Marcus Grant told me a couple of weeks ago, you know, Russell might want to cook, but Pete likes to hit the drive-through.
Yeah, and Denver's kind of in that situation now too.
Yep.
Let's get caught up in some other emotions about the draft, particularly Bob. Just what stuck with you, or what even now, 2 weeks later, are you still pondering, trying to process? Because we learned so much, the plate tectonics move so much in that time that it does take weeks to just reckon with everything that we learned.
Right. I think so. I mean, you know, from a fantasy perspective, we're all so excited with Najee Harris's, with the landing spots for Najee Harris and Jamar Chase, I think, to a degree as well. I think it's interesting how many guys ended up with playing with guys they already have connections to.
Right.
I think this is probably a good thing for us, right? I mean, you know, I think there'll be more off-season work, you know, in person for players. But, you know, when you come in with a built-in connection, I think that's a good thing. And we'll see about Najee Harris. I think, you know, so, you know, we can't totally read the future, but you can see, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, and I am not, to see that this guy fell into a perfect place. I mean, we can go back all the way to Mike Tomlin's ready to run the wheels off fast Willie Parker. That's his jam, right? That's what he wants to do, even if it's not an ideal offensive line situation. Although I think Matt Canada taking over as offensive coordinator, we'll see more misdirection, maybe things they'll be running the ball differently than we saw in the past. And I think that maybe makes a difference. But, you know, all this talk, and Mike Dempsey mentioned this, my co-host on Sirius, you know, everyone's Alejandro Villanueva being gone. Well, nobody ran out and signed him to a big-ass deal right off the bat, right? I mean, it took him some time to get a place. It's not, so maybe he wasn't the best thing since sliced bread out there, right? So I just think this is a good, it's an ideal landing spot. And as fantasy managers, we get emotionally invested in that. I'm already overpaying like crazy for Najee Harris, and unabashedly so, because I like the situation. And how many running backs right now have the thing I'm looking for? I want one thing. I want a clear path to workload when I'm drafting right now. As we get closer to the season, I'll start fine-tuning that and dialing it in. But where we're sitting now, there's not a ton of guys that have a clear path to workloads. A lot of the ones that that had it last year don't have it this year. So, you know, I think we're all going to be buying into that. Jamar Chase, we're all going to be buying into the, you know, the connection with Joe Burrow and the hope that he is the next Justin Jefferson, because that's what we do in our mind. You know, we see one guy come in from a situation and fare really well. Well, wow, it's set up even better for Jamar Chase. Why won't he do even better? Well, he probably won't, but but I'm willing to take a shot on him at the right price. Kyle Pitts, we'll have to see. We know rookie tight ends don't do great things. This is a pretty unique situation, though. A confluence of coaching staff, Arthur Smith being the innovator, an offensive mind, a solid supporting cast, and the draft capital expended. Certainly, they're going to give him a chance to emerge this year. So I think it was an exciting draft from a fantasy perspective. I thought a lot of guys went to great places. I thought a lot of great places with guys didn't draft somebody who would screw us up. Miles Gaskin people, congratulations
Mike
to
Davis.
you. Yeah, Mike Davis. We'll see.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm doing right now as we speak. Hope to have these out by the end of the week. My first time ever doing season-long projections, and season-long projections really force you to be honest. If you say this team is going to have this many pass completions, this many targets to distribute, and you distribute them and you don't like how the numbers look, well, then you have to either change your starting consideration or rethink something. And you're right to point out that Najee Harris at this point has zero competition for snaps and touches. My only hesitation there, and this is the neurotic Steelers fan talking, Bob, is it takes more than one offseason to overhaul a running game.
Sure.
And we've seen the NFL wise up to the idea that rush yards, for the most part, are created by the play call and the execution of the team than the running back. Running backs can add value with speed and elusiveness and breaking tackles and things like that. And hey, Najee Harris has some of that stuff, but it's going to be rough. The Steelers' offensive line is rough. They did get Green, the center in the third round, who fits Matt Canada's zone scheme, can get to the second level. Another thing the Steelers are doing is reinventing their line away from the finesse offensive line they were before. But again, is that a function of players like Alejandro Villanueva? Bob, I don't know if you saw Villanueva's comments when he joined the Ravens. Mm-hmm. He said, well, he played at Air Force, right?
Yeah.
He was like, I like to just line up and hit guys. Right. I like running. I'm glad I'm on Baltimore. I'm glad I can just get back to that in this run-heavy offense. So was it Villanueva that made them a finesse offensive line, or was it trying to build around? See, when I look at the Steelers, Bob, I just see a team in denial that is continuing to try to hold on to the past as it slips away. And maybe Joe Burrow and Bengals are trying to hold on to the past with the connection to Jamar Chase. But I will say this, speaking of doing projections, I was doing the Bengals projections this morning, and as long as you assume they're going to be a 3-wide set team, and you assume that Joe Burrow is going to pass roughly at the rate that he did last year, around 40 times a game, then you're going to have 250 to 300 wide receiver receptions in this offense. And I don't know how you chop those up without Chase exceeding expectations.
Right. I would agree with that. And it's easy to forget, too. I'm just double checking it. Did not the Carolina Panthers have 3 receivers in the top 36?
Right.
Even with Teddy Bridgewater?
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, this is not like an unattainable goal here. and no. So I agree with you. I think, and I do think, we're looking at some of the rookie, wide receivers. I mean, Waddle going to Miami. Are there enough guys to go around? Or are there enough going to be enough balls to go around? I think that's going to depend on Tua Tagovailoa. And look, I could sit here and tell myself a happy story about him too, right? I mean, and that's part of what we're trying to do here. And if I'm trying to tell myself a happy story, here was a guy coming off a really serious injury, didn't get any offseason work with his teammates, with the new offense, other than, classroom work, came in, put up winning numbers, right? He was winning mostly. He wasn't putting up the great fantasy numbers, but do I think it's impossible that they'll come? No. And especially when you add some of the weapons they've added for him. And so I'm fine with Waddle as well. I'm fine with Devontae Smith as well, although I'm a little more concerned because, Jalen Hurts needs to up that percentage completion a little bit for me.
Yeah, touching on a few of the things there that you brought up with Waddle, and Waddle's fantastic. I think there's an interesting Waddle versus Fuller question here, which is just Will Fuller's going to miss the first game with a suspension, but does Will Fuller stay healthy? Is Will Fuller going to be able to rekindle what he had with Deshaun Watson? We know what Tua can do with Waddle, and like you said, Tua underwhelming. You can say less preparation, coming back from an injury. I also think the offense that Chan Gailey had in wasn't really an offense suited to his strengths. So you have some continuity there with Godsey and Eric Studesville, offensive line, see what they do about right tackles.
Isn't some of it too, Sig, you're kind of, you're listening to the signals the team are sending.
Right.
The Dolphins have sent really consistent signals and then backed it up with their actions, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're all in on this. Just like, we could look at their backfield and say, wow, whoever that guy is, that guy's going to be busy. It was when it was Myles Gaskin, he was busy. When it was Salvan Ahmed, he was busy, right? I mean, once they commit to this, they seem to have, and I think it's just kind of one of the things I like about Brian Flores. I like the way he's building this organization. I like Chris Greer too, just to everybody's credit. But I like the way Brian Flores seems to run this team, and everything is going to be a competition. But once he finds his guy, he's going to sit here. I think he's going to be supportive, and so Tua's going to get every opportunity. Also, now that Fitz is gone, they don't really have that much choice.
They don't. But I like the idea of going all in on Tua this year. So let's see what you have this year. It's funny. I was on a show with Dan Schneier, who's terrific, does a Giant show, Big Blue Banter. And we were just talking about the Giants. And I just mentioned that, you would think that the Giants would be similar. And I guess they did go get Kenny Golladay and they got Kadarius Toney. I don't know how much that really changes the offense. But Jason Garrett and whatever he's doing, I just think that the Giants have a terrible situation set up to really evaluate Daniel Jones, where Miami's done the opposite. And they're really going to be able to see, control everything, up everything so there's no excuses, solve for X being is Tua our guy. You mentioned Devontae Smith, and I think you and I are in accordance here with the idea that is Jalen Hurts really the best quarterback for Devontae Smith? I know they play together. You want a rhythm passer. You want somebody who's going to get the ball out quickly. You want to set up Devontae Smith getting open early in those. It's kind of like the problem that Jerry Jeudy, another Alabama receiver, had with Drew Lock last year. That's why the whole Denver situation, is it going to be Lock? Is it going to be Bridgewater? Is it going to be Rodgers even? Changes how you look at those receivers and you look at the offense. I want to touch on one other thing real quickly before I forget, because one of the things I love about the 2 weeks after the draft, Bob, so the draft happens.
Yes.
And we react to it. And we put out our draft grades and we start to get the wheels in our head turning. But more and more, I see articles that reveal some of the thinking. It used to be that, and Josh Norris always did a great job for this. By the way, did you see Josh Norris, what he did in his mock draft for Underdog Fantasy? He got 16 of the picks right. 16. It's never been done before. The Huddle Report, they rate the mock drafts. He blew away the all-time top score for predicting. Josh is really good and a great dude too. But parsing through the coaches and GMs post draft press conferences, how they're going to use a player, what they were thinking. Were they thinking about another player? Did they get trade offers? Or were they making trade offers to move up? And there's all this stuff that comes out after the draft when our ears are still ringing from everything that have happened that reveal interesting things. And on the Panthers, there was one that was actually on the Panthers website.
Yeah.
That they broke down what Matt Rule's wife is texting him, you better draft Hubbard, but it sounds like they really strongly considered trading down. It sounds like the Bears were definitely willing to make the offer they'd made to the Giants, probably and more. They end up taking J.C. Horn. And what did it say, Bob? There was silence after the pick. And then Rule said something like, well, it was what we wanted all along, which was what you wanted all along. Anyway, it's just fascinating, Bob, to not just hear about the whys or the strategy, but just get a feel for what these draft rooms are like. Real quick, because it was basically the story of the draft leading up to the draft. Your knee-jerk reaction to Kyle Shanahan taking Trey Lance and how you're going to look back on that 2 months of silliness, but we do love our silliness.
We do love our silliness. I tend to divorce myself a little more from the silliness. I'm fine. So I've been doing fantasy football now for 30 plus years, and as not a draftnik, right? There's plenty of them out there who do amazing things, and I like to watch what they do, but I'm not doing that. So I don't really have to get too excited until somebody puts a helmet on a player. And that's when I start going, okay. But obviously I was caught up in that. I never thought it was Mac Jones. I never thought he looked like the player, just my view, that you trade up for. You make that kind of move to land, right? You're looking for upside when you make that move. And I don't think he's not going to be a solid player. I think he probably landed in the right place, but he's not the kind of guy that I see a team making this huge move to jump up for. And so Lance looks more like that guy. I think Justin Fields looked more like that guy too than Mac Jones to me. But I'm intrigued. Like, we've all seen what Kyle Shanahan can do in terms of innovative play calling and creating mismatches and doing all those things, and having another chess piece that's going to cause all kinds of trouble for opposing defenses. I'm excited to see it when we see it. And we'll see what Jimmy G can do. I mean, I'm still not sure how bad he is because they've been pretty good with him at quarterback on occasion. And I realize he has limitations, but the limitations seem to fit the design, or the design seems to fit the limitations, however you want to view that, that he might have. And, his biggest limitation is obviously been staying on the field. If he stays on the field this year, I'm kind of excited to see how it plays out on a week-to-week basis. Are they going to feel pressure to get Trey Lance in there? Seems like they won't, as long as they're winning. So maybe a little bit of a wait before we see what they have. And I like the little hints of a Taysom Hill kind of role that come floating out and things like that to make us concerned. But I like Trey Lance. I'll be investing in Dynasty with a long-term view, because I think he's going to be a hell of a player, just especially if he continues playing for Kyle Shanahan. And whether he's the starter or not this season, I mean, if he's not, it's because the team is having success, and that means Kyle Shanahan stays around longer.
Exactly. Win-win, right? I love how you phrase that, how bad Jimmy Garoppolo is, because he was pretty bad in week 1 last year. Before he got hurt, he was pretty bad. Speaking of Trey Lance and the idea of stocking up on Lance, I actually have Lance ahead of Lawrence in my Bloom 100 or rookie rankings or whatever, however you want to do it. I suppose I take Lawrence earlier in redraft, but I wanted to get your reaction. Well, let's just go through. I think there are 3 teams that we're really looking at as total blank slates coming into this draft. And I want to just get your reaction to each one, their draft, and what you think was going on. And we can start with Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence. And they signed Tim Tebow, Bob. Aside of all the hot take layers, I do echo something that my colleague, who I think is here, Jason Wood, who I always enjoy talking to football and any other things with. And I've talked to other folks behind the scenes that are saying, yeah, Urban, early signs, not sure. And this is something that plays into the Lawrence versus Lance debate, right? Are they an organization that will allow them to flourish? They have a good gardener. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So we learned a lot about Jacksonville through their draft. They had a ton of capital to spend. What do you think about the Urban Meyer Jags so far?
It's the Jags, so I have a hard time getting excited, right? Because it's been a long time since they did anything exciting. This is a good move. Look, I'll tell you, I see Trevor Lawrence, and again, I talk about not being a draft nick, but I have a television box. And so, you see things, including going back to 2017, the Elite 11 thing that the NFL Network put out there. They've replayed it some. But, Lawrence and Justin Fields were the 2 names that are still recognizable among that group. But what has Trevor Lawrence done to cool the enthusiasm, right? I mean, he's gone on from winning in high school to winning in college to now being exactly what everyone thought he was going to be. I think that's kind of why it's not as exciting as maybe it could be, because I mean, it just seems like all predestined, and there wasn't a lot of mystery surrounding the pick. I think he'll be serviceable. Look, he doesn't have the magic arm. I don't know that he needs a magic arm. It's a really good arm. They've got a good array of weapons around him. I think we'll see more Urban Meyer influence with speed. We saw it with Travis Etienne showing up already, Marvin Jones, and so. Look, I think he is. I think he's a guy that will get drafted to redraft. I kind of agree with you. I'm maybe not looking that direction in Dynasty as much. I maybe, but maybe it depends on what I'm picking. I have a hard time getting overly excited about this, and maybe because it's the expected thing. I saw a tweet, and I wish I could find it, about the Tim Tebow thing, though, because it made perfect sense. It's, you're a new guy, you come into a new job. And what do? You find a guy you've had a connection with for 15 plus years that you feel comfortable with, who demonstrates the way you like to do things to the rest of the team. I mean, I'd be surprised if Tim Tebow makes the final roster, but having that guy around to, show everyone what's expected, when you come in and you're trying to build this organization around your way of doing things. I don't, I get why you would do that. I'm not, I don't. look, I'm not a Tim Tebow enthusiast.
Apologist.
I don't get a Tim Teboner over anything. It's just that's not my thing. Never has been, right? But I get why you would do this.
That's funny, Bob. The T-boner, sorry, Joe, is it's a potent little double entendre there. If you dig, I'll say this since we went there, since we opened it up, Bob. I'll say this about the personnel move, and I think, and I'm not usually doing the glass half empty, but you did the glass half full. Here's my glass half empty. Okay, number one, you saw a lot of players say, "Well, can I come back?"
Right.
And some players even incredulous, saying, "You mean he's going to just walk off the sideline after 8 years and change positions and get a chance? What about the other guys?" And what that makes me wonder, and I'm just saying, I wonder if, remember what happened in Jacksonville? They lost the locker room, the team, the brass, Coughlin, the coach, whatever. They lost the locker room. I think it was when they extended Bortles, to be honest. I think that was the beginning of the players saying, "What's going on here? What do the guys in charge actually think or see? Because we know who's good and who's not. Do they?" And I just wonder if the locker room might say, like, "What's going on here? Is this really, like, this is important to our business?" But you're right. It could just be like, "Hey, this is Tim. He knows what's going on." I think that, we'll see. And it'll just be interesting to revisit this. Say, will Urban Meyer be coaching the team 3, 4, 5 years from now?
Right. So two things. I'm not necessarily sold on Urban Meyer. Maybe that's where we should be the starting point, right?
Good.
That should be the starting point for me. And the second point here is I have absolutely zero belief that Tim Tebow is going to be anywhere near the active roster or on the team by the time the season starts. That's just not going to happen. It's not a realistic view. So everyone's saying, "I want my chance." I don't think he's getting a chance. I think he's getting a job to come in and help Urban Meyer establish, an identity, and I don't even know if he's capable of doing that at this point. So, and again, I have questions about Urban Meyer. I've had questions since the hire and some of his subsequent moves since the hire. I mean, he still seems to believe he's the biggest fish in a small pond. And I mean, I think everyone who's come to the NFL with that feeling has learned otherwise really quickly. He did too. I wonder if he's really learned the lesson.
Right. And I always bring this up every time we talk about Urban Meyer, Bob, is that Urban Meyer actually admitted one of the difficulties going from college to the pros is that you can look across and see that they have better players than you or as good of players as you. In other words, when you're at those big time programs, you have advantages. Real quick, Andrew Frost brought this up in the chat room. Travis Etienne versus James Robinson. And that, like you said, some guys, Myles Gaskin, Mike Davis, they didn't get their fantasy value ruined. James Robinson did. But how do you initially approach this? Do you target one, neither, both, just shrug and wait?
Shrug and wait. It's buy the cheaper commodity if at all possible. I mean, I'm not going to be the first person diving into that pool. I'll kind of wait and see what other people are doing, and hopefully, I know you have been, and anyone out there who's been doing any best balls or mock drafting realizes there is a feeding frenzy on running backs in the first 2 rounds. It seems like that every year. It seems more like it this year. I mean, I'm seeing 17 plus guys go in the first 2 rounds of a 12 team, 17 plus running backs. So, you kind of sit back and get yourself locked in on some guys. Again, clear path to workload is what I'm looking for. Neither of those guys has it. I liked Robinson when he did, even with the new staff coming in, when they brought in Carlos Hyde, I thought, wow, they didn't bring in a guy to work alongside him. They brought in a guy to spell or, serve as the backup should something happen. Now with ETN there, and I don't, I know Urban Meyer said that Kadarius Toney was the guy he wanted. Maybe not. But ETN, it makes it hard for me to get excited about either one, and because you don't know who's going to establish themselves. Opportunity matters for running backs and getting a hot hand in these situations, and it's just something that's going to be difficult to predict week to week unless someone comes out and really gets a hold of that job. Also, I mean, I thought James Robinson was phenomenal last year. Yes. It's not like we haven't seen, running backs, though, fall off the radar after just 1 year, too. So, I mean, I think people were investing heavily. I was in the workload. Now I can't. So I'm waiting to see who's cheaper. Right now, it seems like Robinson's cheaper, and I'm
a lot cheaper. Yeah, Robinson's a lot cheaper. And it's going to be interesting to see because reflects on Urban Meyer's ideas about what it takes to win in the NFL. Like you said, he wanted Tony at ETN, who's going to get the ball in his hands however he can. Are you adjusting here to the NFL? Then you also have this idea of this James Robinson, what he overcame last year. I think there's how good he looked or how productive he was or how much he helped your fantasy team win. But then there was the idea of the waters that he was paddling upstream against, quarterback play, just the team's effort and the team's interest. So
the thing that shocked me about him was the team was so horrible that they didn't care. They just kept using him because he was the best thing they had. He was like a life preserver, right? They're sinking. The ship is sinking. Just hand it to the guy who has still got an oar in the water, right? And they kept doing that. And I mean, I was fine with it. From a fantasy perspective, it was great. But you wonder if it'll be a similar approach if they have some more pieces around him either way, even, maybe a little better passing attack, whatever. I mean, the quarterback play was atrocious last year. I think, whatever you say about Trevor Lawrence, it's going to be better than last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, affects how you look at all these guys, Chark, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault. And then you bring up the name Philip Lindsay, right? Because Philip Lindsay had a tremendous rookie season, and now he's in Houston, and we'll see what happens there. But is Philip Lindsay the name to bring up? Not because Lindsay's dropped off, because there's a lot of people that'll point to undrafted free agent rookies who have a big season, and this is where my man Eric Stoner would say Priest Holmes, but very rarely do they turn out like Priest Holmes. Instead, they drop off the map. Some people will point to draft pedigree, but in the case of Philip Lindsay, I don't think it's draft pedigree. I think it's that they kept treating him like he was an undrafted free agent. And I am worried. They did. And I'm worried if James Robinson is just looked at as an undrafted free agent. I know they've said some nice things about him. So even because where I fall back to on this situation with ETN and Robinson, Bob, is hopefully rational coaching will see that Robinson's going to get the tough yards, and you need that more in the NFL than you need some sort of lightning speed guy that you can get the ball in the open field, like what they plan to do with ETN. But I suspect they're going to keep playing ETN in situations that Robinson would be superior because this is the regime that invested a first-round pick in him. Okay, next one, Detroit, the kneecap biters. They stay home at number 7. You can certainly see in the picks what they're going for. How do you like what Brad Holmes is doing?
I mean, I'm not against it. I see they're building a culture there, obviously. And you mentioned kneecap biters, and you can think of Amon-Ra St. Brown even as one of those, right? So I'm look, Smash Mouth football is great. I don't know that their backfield is set to be Smash Mouth yet. We'll find out. But they're building the offensive line that way, and I think we should view this as a long-term process. And I know we're getting excited about DeAndre Swift. I'm a little excited about him. Realizing Jamal Williams is there and everything. But, I guess if I'm looking to invest in Detroit, TJ Hawkinson's at top of the list, and I'm probably not drafting Swift as early as everyone else, but I do think he has great opportunities. I just think at a team in transition where they're trying to rebuild a culture and trying to kind of start from scratch, and it's been kind of horrible, that maybe we should set our expectations accordingly early on.
And setting the expectations accordingly early is going to be a bad team. It's going to be a losing team. Because of the defense they were left with. It's just, but they do have something interesting. Like you said, the running game. I don't know how much the game scripts are going to allow them to take advantage of what they have, because they've got 2 good tackles, Sewell and Decker. They've got a great center they just extended in Ragnow. And hey, they're probably going to move on from Hala Pulivati Vaitai, who they paid like 10, another good. I had to pull that one up because I wanted to get that right. Who kick him inside a guard and let him just be a road grader. Well, then that's how you're going to get the most value out of him. So that will be something to watch. But they're going to be in run game scripts for like a quarter and a half. Go ahead.
Right, and they have the guys. I mean, you look at the assistants they brought in. I mean, Dan Campbell aside. I mean, you look at Anthony Lynn. I mean, his history prior to his time with the Chargers. I mean, run heavy. I think most every running back who's ran under him as a position coach or coordinator was 1,000-yard backs, and would you expect from a former running back? And same with Deuce Staley. I mean, comes in there and playing his role as well. So I think they're definitely projecting what they want to be just by the coaching hires. And all you have to do is listen to Dan Campbell. I mean, he'll tell you exactly what they want to be. And so I'm eager to see how it plays out over time. But you're right. I mean, to be that kind of team, you need to play defense. And if you're not playing defense and you have to throw the football, you need better receivers. You need, and they don't have those yet.
Yeah, maybe better quarterback than Jared Goff. We'll see.
And maybe that too. Look, I don't know. I think Goff maybe got hosed, right? I mean, to a degree. I mean, lost confidence, and I get it. And we can go back to the discussion about Sean McVay having to re-earn his genius card, based on what I said earlier about the misfire on Goff, essentially 3 misfires on Goff if you take it all in the total. But I don't know that the Lions didn't come away with this as best they could under the circumstances. And I also wonder, maybe Jared Goff had been better last year if he had a true deep threat. Maybe the Lions would be better if they had a true. Maybe they do. Maybe Perriman can be that and surprise me. But that's what it's going to take. I mean, he's going to have to throw the ball deep some. They need somebody to get down and get under the ball.
Yeah, Anthony Lynn's offense is don't turn the ball over. Just don't turn the ball. So I wanted to go from Philip
got to play defense
to Tyrod Taylor. We'll see. Lions fans, I think you're seeing internal consistency in what they're doing. Like you said, even Amon-Ra St. Brown in some ways. Who's going to lead the team in catches? What's he going to have, Bob? He's going to I think Jamar Chase will probably lead rookie receivers in catches, but St. Brown will be second.
I heard Justin Rogers from MLive. He thinks Tyrell Williams is the guy to watch there as well. Maybe just kind of as a 1-year stopgap. And I've kind of been overlooking him and probably should mention him for that reason alone. But I'm kind of with you. St. Brown is the guy I have my eye on now.
Yeah, it's tough with Williams. He was a very solid player, and Anthony Lynn knows his game. He didn't play last year because of a foot injury, so that's tough. And then we have the other new kids on the block, Atlanta, and they had the most intriguing choice of the first round. You could take a quarterback. In this case, it ended up being Justin Fields. You could take Kyle Pitts. A lot of people had as the best non-quarterback in the draft, or you could trade down. And I want to point this out enough. Again, these post-draft press conferences and pieces that are written, probably was not noticed by a lot of folks that A.J. McCarron was signed on Friday, on the day after the first round. And they asked Fontenot and Smith, would this announcement have been made if the draft had gone differently? And they looked at each other and chuckled, and Fontenot said, "You give us too much credit. We don't plan things out like that." Oh, so you were going to take Trey Lance. Anyway, what do you think of what Fontenot and Smith did in their first draft?
It's interesting. I mean, look, it's hard to argue against Kyle Pitts. You're arguing against the position and not the player. And when you're doing that, I mean, I think you have to take into account Arthur Smith and the way he's might be willing to use a tight end differently than other coaches have used them. We've already seen some of that. I mean, we see Kyle Pitts working out of the backfield and lining up in the slot on the regular, all these things that you would think. But he does seem to be a pretty advanced talent for that kind of player. Look, we'll see. I'm kind of waiting to see what happens with the Julio Jones piece of all this, right? That kind of is, that's kind of defined. But I do think they're right. I think Matt Ryan, and you think about Matt Ryan is a guy, what is he, 37, 38? Maybe he has a few years of 36. I don't know. Maybe I'm overstating the case. But either way, I mean, they say they think he has a few good years left. Well, if you're trying to think of a coach who could maybe turn around a quarterback, maybe you should look back to Tennessee, where Ryan Tannehill was drug off the ash heap and turned into, if not a really capable NFL quarterback, a super high-end fantasy quarterback. With Arthur Smith running the show. So I have some hope for everybody involved there.
Yeah, I think that you're right to point out that Arthur Smith, and it's going to be interesting as we see the reveal on these offenses, the new offenses. Did Arthur Smith just have an offense in mind? Because remember, he was promoted from the inside after. Didn't Mariota have the same thing as Jason Campbell? 4 coordinators in 4 years. Is that right? And they just wanted some continuity for Mariota, I think, is part of the reason.
And it turns out he just wasn't that good.
Yeah, he was okay against the Chargers last year, but I guess based on the fact that no one wanted to trade for him and he just had to take a pay cut, I guess, that must be the case, or at least that's what. By the way, I want to say just RIP real quick because we're talking Hawaii football. Cole Brennan, man, saw that he died earlier,
we all have our demons,
37. Man. I know, a legend, a true college football legend. And took them to the Sugar Bowl, took Hawaii to the Sugar Bowl.
130 plus career touchdown passes?
Yeah, a lot of places in the record book where you can find Cole Brennan. And he had a great preseason. I think there was a car accident he had in 2010. He said he was never the same after that, had a traumatic brain injury. Anyway, just got off on a tangent. I feel like I just want to recognize that since we're talking about Hawaii football through Mariota. But anyway, the other thing that's interesting is you mentioned Julio Jones, and you know a team that seems to have some urgency in a Super Bowl window, or that they believe they're in a Super Bowl window, is Tennessee. Arthur Smith has that connection back to Tennessee. So,
I've heard Indianapolis thrown out there as well.
Yeah, woo, Indianapolis. That's not well. It's the kind of move that Chris Ballard hasn't really had a chance to make yet. So
Chris Ballard, man, that's a patient dude.
Yeah, he is.
That's a patient man.
Very patient, very patient. Since we mentioned Justin Fields, I want to just ask you this. Or at least serve it up to you in this way, Bob. Do you think it's wise to let a regime, Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, right up until we heard the press conference, nobody was sure that they were both going to be back, or maybe either of them was going to be back. Now you're letting them trade away next year's first round pick. But do you make an exception for Justin Fields, or do you just say, hey, you're still the coach and the GM, so do what you want?
I'm still torn on this one. I'm torn on this about Pace. Nagy's 2 years removed from being coach of the year, right?
Right.
And honestly, the Bears, after a long drought, have seen the playoffs. And I don't, look, I don't want to be an apologist for Matt Nagy, but it needs to get better. This gives them a chance to get better. I'm still a little bit baffled. I don't know, but it's not like the first time. Steve Keim got a second chance, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like it never happens. I didn't think Pace was the guy it was going to happen for. I think it was a good move, though. I think it was the right move. And maybe sometimes we learn from our past mistakes, Sig, it turns out.
Yeah.
And
people can change.
Yes. And so look, I'm hoping for the best. I think, if for no other reason, I'd like to see Allen Robinson at least some point in his career play with a quarterback who matches his own abilities.
Yes. Yeah. Like we won't have to see 3 or 4 times a game the frustrated Allen Robinson putting his hand up and then just trudging back to the huddle. Although I actually think Andy Dalton for the short term is a better fantasy quarterback for him.
Somebody fact check me on this. Get the fact checkers out. Is Andy Dalton not the winningest quarterback in Bears history right now? I mean, would he not be at the top of that?
Right.
So,
yeah, I was excited for Robinson this year. If it was going to be Dalton, it's not going to be Dalton for the whole season. I don't know if it's going to be Dalton at all, just because Andy Dalton fed AJ Green pretty well back in the day.
Right.
Before we go off the rails here for the last 10 minutes, like we always do, Bob. I mean, we've kind of, our brains are always off the rails. We get them on the rails to provide this great content for everybody, and then we go back off the rails. You mentioned Najee Harris, and it's probably just because he's from the Harris clan, right? So any non-Harrises that you want to plant your flag at this early juncture and say, this guy, I'm looking at it. Yeah, this is one of my guys this year.
Yeah, I'm buying Michael Carter at the price. Just again, because we like the offense. I think he's, kind of easy to overlook. He's small. He's, we see him as a certain way. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He's a huge, big play threat. If I'm looking at what the Jets are doing here, it seems like they're trying to give some explosive playmaking options to the young quarterback Zach Wilson, and we'll see if it works out. But also an enormous left side of their offensive line. I mean, I just like some of the moves that are being made here. I was talking to Brian Costello from the New York Post, and he kind of just said, the jury's obviously still out on Joe Douglas, and it took him a little time to work the old regime out of his system. Right. But, just like me in life, I mean, there came a point where I realized, oh, look, the secret to happiness. Make a good decision, then make another one.
Mm-hmm.
Then make another good decision.
Mm-hmm.
Fewer bad decisions, more good decisions. That seems to be the direction they're going in. So, but between Elijah Moore and Michael Carter, I think those are a couple guys that can be maybe a little more. Well, I think Elijah Moore people are already on, but I think Carter, it's easy to overlook what he did working alongside Javonte Williams because he was alongside Javonte Williams. Maybe he can be a little more if he gets the lead role. And given the lackluster cast around him, love you, Tevin Coleman, but damn.
Yeah.
And same with Michael Pirine. Maybe he turns into the Michael Pirine we all heard about. But I think more likely is Michael Carter is the guy who had 23 plays with 20 yards or more last year. And that's something that an offense can make some use of.
It's not going to be hard for Carter to stand out as they install the new running game there under Michael Floor. It's funny you said make good decisions. I can only think of Sun Ra, the great Sun Ra from Saturn, who says, make a mistake. You did something wrong. Make another mistake and do something right. But that would take us deep down into a Sun Ra, which I recommend everybody does at some point in their life. But I want to ask you, speaking of intergalactic travels, as we go off the rails here, Bob, you are a traveler, man after my own heart. You're here. While you're here, take a look around, get to know the place. Give me some place that has stuck with you from your travels as you've expanded your horizons.
Amsterdam was phenomenal for many reasons. Some of the cities, I mean, the city you're in now has stuck with me, New Orleans. The times I've been there, it's been fantastic. San Francisco, I thought was super cool place when I was there. I know things have changed since I was last there. But man, I just sometimes the appearance of a place just gets me. Paris, France, you know, just walking down these streets, they all kind of look the same, but it's just this amazingly cool look. So, I actually, I've thought like I could live in Paris. I thought I could live here. I thought I could live in New Orleans. I thought this is the kind of place I could live. Not that I was looking to make a move at the time, but both of those places seem like that. So those would be the top two. I don't know if I could live in San Francisco because I don't make that much money.
Right. You want to live 6 people in a 1-bedroom place or something like that. The common theme that I see in the places that you all named, Bob, I don't know if you've read Naked Lunch, William Burroughs, Interzone. I think he brings up like Tangiers as another place. There are these places where, especially New Orleans, Amsterdam, San Francisco, these are some of the most major ports or entry points. They're cities that belong to the world, not just to the country that they're part of. So you really have a true free exchange of culture and ideas and something emerging out of those places that only comes out of those places.
Right.
And there's, go ahead.
So New Orleans remind me of, the mix too between the old and the new, how they keep those. Frankfurt does that too really well.
Right.
Where you have like just the old built or the new built around the old. And they take care of the old, and the old is really super old, right? So they, there's reasons for that. And I think both these places that really stick with me, I think a lot of them have a deeper history than the places that I've been at. Even though I'm sitting here in Albuquerque, which is like the oldest, it's 300-year-old city or something. So, I should give due respect to that. But it seems like the more history steep places are a little more fascinating.
Well, treasuring even your past and paying respect to it. You know what they say, or at least some of the folks down here, what they say when someone dies, Bob? They say that they became an ancestor. This person became an ancestor yesterday. Honoring your ancestors is a big, 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 big deal in New Orleans. And I think some of that comes from the influence of African culture. Absolutely. And it's funny too, because my lovely wife, who you know, Kate, she's the great granddaughter of Robert McKee, who's one of the great builders. He in the Southwest. There's a lot of buildings in El Paso and around the Southwest. Los Alamos that has his name on them, and she had 2 busts of him and his wife that she had kept. I think every descendant in the family got a pair of the busts, and we put them up here. And it's perfect here, right? Your ancestors are always with you. You're always standing on the shoulders of your ancestors. Other thing I want to say about New Orleans that I know would click. I can't wait until we get to spend time together in New Orleans, Bob. Is I came from Austin, where they say keep Austin weird. New Orleans is weird. Right. New Orleans is like capital W weird.
Yes.
And you truly get to be yourself. You get to be yourself in Amsterdam. I remember from the times I visited Amsterdam, one of the things that stuck with me was that someone said Amsterdam is a world village. It's not a world city. It's a world village. And the other thing is, I think in Amsterdam, the zoo is called something like nature is an artist, which I just think there's so much in that statement.
Every place over there, walking is a big deal. I don't drive, so it's great to be able to go everywhere. And it seemed like Amsterdam was a little more spread out. I guess they're all spread out, but within the little neighborhoods and the locales you were in, walking around. I guess the other places that like Florence and Venice, they're not places I'd want to live though. They're fantastic to visit. The great history, Rome, all these things were all fantastic, but it seemed like Paris and New Orleans were more the places where you could like get a little apartment at the top of something, put your satellite dish up, and get to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much that has happened in those places. And New York City is kind of like that too. So much has happened. So much was born or originated there. You mentioned Florence and Venice. I got to mention a couple other places I have been to actually. Florence, loved the gelato. And I love that there's all of these squares in front of the cathedrals where people just come out at night, get a bottle of wine, just like the city actually comes out. Down here on the bayou, on Bayou St. John, the neighborhood we're in, down on the bayou, the same thing happens here, like actual public spaces where people just come and spend time together. That doesn't happen.
Right. Rome is like that a lot too. I mean, just huge crowds, at places, and late into the night. It's a whole different vibe there, and it's great. Just not quite as it seems as conductive to living.
Right. Especially watch when you cross the street. Rome was the place I felt the most in danger anytime I crossed the street. And Venice, it really is like living in the past. I mean, Venice is really like living. It's
like a movie set.
Yeah,
it feels like a movie set.
And people worry that what happened in Venice is going to happen here in New Orleans, where like the people don't actually live in Venice anymore. They just work in Venice. And what's some place that you haven't traveled yet that you're looking forward to traveling to?
I think I would like to see Japan at some point.
Ooh, yeah.
And I've heard great things from friends, so that would probably be at the top of the list. I haven't made a list for a while because it's been unrealistic, so I have to remake my list now. I have to rebuild my list because it's starting to look more realistic.
Yeah,
Australia's on the list for sure too.
Oh yeah, Australia. And if you go down if you go down that far, you should go to New Zealand or go to the South Pacific. Or there's so much down there, like really on the other side of the globe. You mentioned Japan, and I've heard people say something to the effect of, Bob, that you want to see the future, go to Japan.
Right.
As down here in New Orleans, the infrastructure and so on. And Japan, I think, is a real contemporary city in terms of constantly rethinking and reimagining public life and technology and its role in public life.
Yeah, and Korea, you like that too.
Yeah,
a little more frantic.
And it's Korea and K-pop. Did you catch a couple of years ago, Bob, that K-pop has like taken over the minds of? It's like the Beatles. Do you understand? Help me out here, Bob, because especially with all of these things happening, like I didn't think I would be so young when the world would seem like Grandpa Simpson's speech. You won't know what it is, and it will scare you. I'm already turning into Grandpa Simpson. So do you understand K-pop or NBA Top Shot or crypto or any of these things? Someone said we should get you talking about Dogecoin. Have a conversation about that.
I love the tweets about it. And look, I talk to people and try to understand to get my mind around how all these things work. All I know is the new Ginger album will be out soon.
And there you go.
And if you're not listening to the Ukrainian metal stylings of Ginger, you're not listening to anything. But beyond that, the crypto. I mean, I understand the concepts and everything. I always am a little leery of things when everyone gets excited about them. It's just like drafting in fantasy football. I'm running the other way when everyone's running towards something. I'm trying to run the other way. Like I'm buying all the Philip Lindsay I can because it's really late in the draft and it's really cheap and I'm hoping for the best. I guess if I got in on crypto early, I would think the same.
Exactly right. It just didn't make sense to me, but I guess maybe that should be the first sign.
It does make sense though. It's a great idea where we're all just in control. It's peer to peer, it's person to person monetary system without the powerful overlords watching over you.
It's true. Although, but it's the Costanza thing. It's kind of like do the opposite because the latest thing I heard about was this virtual horse racing. Did you hear about this yet?
No,
it's like blockchain based horse racing. Yeah, right. That's funny. That came up at I actually got to see some live music this weekend. But it's called Zed.Run, I think, or something like that. And they actually breed racehorses and race them.
I've heard about this now. Yes.
Yeah. So and I mean, I guess we're really getting to that point where there's going to be an overlay corresponding to everything in the quote unquote real world of this virtual world. But I wonder when the values of things in some of these horses are already going for like 6 figures. Like the virtual stuff will become more valuable than the quote unquote real stuff. I don't know, but Bob, I always know it's real when we get together, pick each other's brains. and join the great people that allow us to do this as our job, and make lists and look forward to the future together. So folks, we appreciate you. If you're at the YouTube, show us the YouTube channel. I sound like an old man. Show us your appreciation if you can. Support, like, comment, subscribe, comment on the video. Love all the activity in the chat room. Early bird prices in effect at football, guys. Of course, you can catch Bob, SiriusXM, football diehards. Folks, we love spending time with you, sharing our life with you. You share your life with us because you're so very classy.